There is a strange moment that happens in every human life when belief feels like the last fragile thread, holding everything together. When the world outside seems too big, too cruel, too uncertain, and yet something inside whispers that maybe you can still make it, that maybe what you believe about yourself is not just a thought, but a force, and that whisper is where this story begins, because belief is not a decoration of the mind. It is a living current running through every cell of the body. William James, the father of modern psychology, once said that our beliefs create the very facts they point to. And though he spoke in the language of the 19th century, modern neuroscience has begun to prove him right. Imagine a person walking down a hospital corridor about to hear the results of a test. The difference between hope and despair is not a small flicker in the mind. It is the pulse of chemicals, the alignment of neurons, the focus of the entire body. Belief literally changes. How the brain fires it decides whether stress hormones flood the bloodstream or whether healing signals take their place. When James studied the human mind, he noticed something radical, that our consciousness does not merely report reality, it helps construct it. This was long before brain scans and fMRI machines, long before we could see that belief and expectation activate the same reward circuits as actual experience. We live in a time where many people secretly feel powerless. They scroll through lives that seem more perfect than their own. They doubt they can change anything about themselves. They think belief is a childish fantasy. But the science of placebo, the study of expectation and brain chemistry, says otherwise. Belief is not about magic. It is about biology. When a patient takes a sugar pill believing it will ease their pain, their brain releases endorphins. When someone practices confidence before a speech, their neurons rehearse success before it happens. This is the hidden power of belief, and it begins not in slogans but in the quiet, unseen dialogue we hold with ourselves. William James believed that faith was not only for religion but for survival. He called it a moral act, an act of courage to choose a view of life before the evidence fully appears, and neuroscience now shows why that matters. Every choice we make sends waves through the brain, shaping future choices. In return, to believe is to sculpt your neural architecture. It is to plant patterns that become habits, and habits that become identity. In modern terms, belief rewires your brain, but in human terms, it builds your life. There was once a woman named Clara who spent her 20s convinced she was destined to fail every job interview, left her feeling smaller. She rehearsed rejection before she ever stepped into the room. One evening, after yet another disappointment, she read a line by William James that said, "Act as if what you do makes a difference. It does." She decided to test, and not by forcing optimism, but by behaving for 1 week as if she mattered. She dressed as though she expected respect. She spoke slower, stood taller. Her brain began to follow her body. Her words started to sound believable, and for the first time, her confidence was not fake, it was learned. And weeks later, she landed the job, not because the world changed, but because her inner posture did. Neuroscientists studying self-efficacy have found the same pattern. When we behave as if we can change, the brain believes us. Neurons mirror intention until it becomes memory. This is how the ancient wisdom of James meets the modern lab. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and decision-making, strengthens through repetition. When you believe you are capable, your attention sharpens, your perception expands, and your emotional regulation steadies. Belief is like the software that tells the hardware of your brain what to prioritize. But there is a deeper level to this that both James and Jung understood. Beneath the surface of belief lies the self-image, the unconscious story about who we think we are. And this is where most people get trapped. They say they want to change, yet their shadow, the rejected parts of themselves, whispers. Otherwise, you can repeat affirmations forever, but if your shadow believes you are unworthy, your mind will sabotage your efforts. James's insight was that belief cannot simply be thought, it must be embodied. The nervous system must feel it is real, and that takes practice. Tonight, try something simple before sleep. Write one sentence beginning with, "I am becoming," and finish it with something you wish to believe, not something you already know. Say it softly, as though teaching a child. Your brain does not argue with gentle repetition. It absorbs it through feeling. This small act builds new pathways that link imagination with possibility. The same mechanism that makes nightmares feel real can make dreams become plans if you use it deliberately. William James would have said that faith in one's own potential is the first moral duty, not because it flatters the ego, but because it animates the soul. Modern neuroscience might phrase it differently. It would say that belief creates prediction error signals, which drive learning that your brain constantly updates reality based on what you expect. In simple words, if you believe something is possible, your brain hunts for evidence to confirm it and ignores what contradicts it. The tragedy is that most of us use this power unconsciously. We believe in our limits more than our capacities. We predict failure and then feel proven right. Belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and so does disbelief. The hidden power of belief is not only in what it can build, but in what it can destroy. William James wanted us to understand that even doubt is a kind of faith in the negative faith that the future cannot surprise us. Imagine waking tomorrow and choosing to suspend disbelief for 24 hours, not to become reckless, but to act as though your effort counts, to notice how your brain adjusts your body, follows your posture, changes your tone, warms up. You do not need to wait for confidence to arrive. You can behave as if it is already yours and your biology will meet you. Halfway belief is not a luxury, it is a function of survival. It is how the brain turns intention into movement. So as you sit here listening, reflect on how many beliefs you have inherited without question. Who told you that you were too late, too old, too broken? Every time you believe them, you lend your neurons to their story. Every time you question them, you reclaim your own. James believed the greatest revolution would not come from machines or empires, but from the individual who dared to believe differently. And in this quiet space between science and spirit, we begin to see what he meant, that belief is not about proving something to the world. It is about shaping the internal world until it becomes visible to others. The hidden power of belief is that it turns invisible choices into visible lives, and it begins in this simple moment, the moment you decide to believe that belief itself matters. Most people think belief is a kind of wishful thinking, a trick of the mind that cannot hold against the weight of reality. But the truth is that belief is the framework through which reality itself takes form. William James once wrote that the greatest discovery of his generation was that a human being can alter his life by altering his attitudes of mind. Modern neuroscience now confirms that these attitudes are not floating abstractions. They are measurable patterns that direct energy through the brain, changing which synapses strengthen, which pathways connect, and which possibilities become visible. Belief is not decoration, it is direction. When a person wakes up with the thought that today will be another failure, their brain begins filtering every sound, every gesture, every glance through that lens. This negative prediction fires, the amygdala releases cortisol, narrows perception, and reduces creative thinking. So when an opportunity arises, it goes unseen, not because it was not there, but because belief made blindness possible. When another person wakes up and tells themselves there might be a chance, the same neurons send a different chemical message. The prefrontal cortex opens the field of view, dopamine flows and motivation increases. The brain prepares for effort. This is not spiritual talk. It is the physics of perception. Belief is the gatekeeper, deciding what enters consciousness. There was a man named Elias who grew up hearing he was lazy. His teachers repeated it. His father said it when he struggled to read as an adult. He carried that belief like a stone in his chest. He would start a project then, give up halfway, confirming again the story that he lacked discipline. One day, a friend handed him a copy of William James's essays on habit. Elias read the line that said, "Belief creates its own verification," and for reasons he could not explain, he decided to run a small experiment. He would assume for 1 week that he was disciplined. He set a timer for 15 minutes each morning to work on a small task. By the third day, he felt something shift, a quiet pride. He had not known the effort. Released dopamine, which encouraged more effort. The neurons that fire together wire together, and so a new identity began to grow. Slowly, belief was rewriting his brain. Modern neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to change itself. But James anticipated it long before we had the instruments to prove it. He called it the law of habit. Every mental state, every belief reinforced by action becomes more likely to repeat. He urged his students to seize the first possible moment to act on a new resolution, because the brain strengthens whatever it rehearses. This is why belief without practice fades, and belief acted upon becomes truth. It is not enough to wish, you must move, and the movement completes the circuit. If you wish to test this tonight, try standing in front of a mirror and speak one sentence. You want your brain to believe something like, "I can learn even now," or "I am capable of patience." Say it while feeling the weight of your body, the breath in your chest, the warmth of your skin. The sensory awareness anchors belief in the nervous system. Repetition without embodiment is only noise. But when sensation joins word, the body begins to teach the brain that it is real. William James's insight also touched something deeper, that Jung later expanded the idea that belief is not just rational choice, but a conversation with the unconscious. The persona, the mask we wear in public, holds one set of beliefs about who we are, while the shadow holds another, often the opposite. The shadow might believe we are unlovable, weak, unworthy, and until we face it, those hidden beliefs run our lives like unseen scripts. You may say you believe in success, but if the shadow believes you deserve failure, it will pull the strings from below. The hidden power of belief therefore includes the courage to meet what you secretly believe against yourself. To explore this, you might try writing a single question in a quiet room. What do I most fear might be true about me? Do not analyze, just listen. The first answer that surfaces usually reveals the hidden belief shaping your world. Once seen, it loses some of its power. James would call this the act of awareness, where consciousness reclaims its authority. Neuroscience would describe it as weakening the old neural loop by naming it awareness interrupts repetition. Both languages point to the same miracle. There is another story of a nurse named Asha who worked long hours in an emergency ward. She believed her exhaustion was proof of weakness. She hid her tears in supply closets one evening. A colleague told her that fatigue was not failure. It was information, a signal that the body needed rest for healing to continue. Asha began leaving the hospital 10 minutes earlier than usual. At first, guilt clawed her, but then she noticed she was more present the next morning. She started to believe that care includes the self. Her belief changed her biology. Her stress hormones dropped. Her empathy increased. The science of compassion fatigue now shows this clearly. The belief that rest is selfish activates guilt networks. The belief that rest is service activates calm. Belief, therefore, is not only personal, it is relational. The way we believe about ourselves teaches others how to treat us. When you believe you have boundaries, the world begins to recognize them. When you believe you are small, others see only your outline. James warned against living second-hand lives shaped by other people's convictions. He wrote that we are spinning our own fates, good or evil, never to be undone except by ourselves in brain terms. This means the external world cannot fully rewrite your neural pathways without your participation. So what keeps us from using this? Power, habit, fear, and inertia. We are attached to the comfort of our known misery more than the uncertainty of possible freedom. Belief requires risk. It asks you to bet on a reality that does not yet exist, but James would remind us that it is precisely this leap that makes human progress possible. The scientist believing an experiment will succeed, the artist believing the blank canvas holds meaning, the parent believing their child will grow strong. Every creation begins with an act of faith, and every act of faith begins with a belief. As you listen to these words, let your own mind wander toward a memory of when you once believed in something that had no proof, yet somehow that belief carried you through. It might have been love, recovery, learning, survival. Belief is the invisible bridge between despair and possibility. It does not erase struggle, but it gives struggle a direction. And now, as the night settles, you can perform one small practice. Close your eyes and picture tomorrow as if belief were guiding it. Imagine yourself walking through the day with quiet certainty, not of perfection but of participation, that your thoughts, your choices, your attention matter. This visualization is not fantasy. It activates the same neural circuits that prepare your body for real action. By the time morning comes, you will already have walked part of the way in your mind. This is the hidden power that William James intuited and that neuroscience now measures belief as the rehearsal of reality before reality arrives. There comes a point when belief begins to move from an idea to an atmosphere. It surrounds you like air, invisible, yet shaping the entire rhythm of your days. When William James wrote about the will to believe, he did not mean blind faith or stubborn denial of evidence. He meant the moment when a person decides to act even without guarantees, when the future has not yet revealed itself. Belief is the courage to begin without assurance. It is the quiet rebellion against the voice that says, wait until you are ready, because readiness never arrives. It must be created in motion. Neuroscience explains this as the feedback loop between action and perception. The brain does not only act after conviction, it builds conviction through the act itself. Consider a musician sitting before an empty score, unsure whether inspiration will come when she begins to move her fingers across the piano keys. Her auditory cortex lights up. Neurons start predicting patterns. Rhythm emerges. Emotion flows. The act itself awakens belief. This is the secret. James tried to teach his students that waiting for confidence is like waiting for wind to sail. Belief must come first, or nothing moves, and the brain waits for your signal before deciding what world to build around you. The same truth unfolds in love. When someone believes they are unworthy of affection, every gesture of kindness feels suspicious. They study the tone, the pauses, the distance. Convinced there must be deception, the brain literally interprets safety as danger because belief has written that code. But when the same person slowly allows the idea that they might be lovable, something chemical shifts. Oxytocin releases, the body relaxes, and connection becomes possible. Belief rewires attachment. It decides whether we build walls or bridges, and every relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting the faith we hold about our own value. One evening, a young teacher named Noah sat alone grading papers. He had started the year with energy, but his class was restless. He felt invisible. He thought maybe he was not meant for this work. Then he remembered a lecture by William James about attention. James had said that the greatest weapon against stress is the ability to choose one thought over another. Noah decided to choose a thought not of success but of service. He began the next class with a single change. Instead of controlling the room, he listened. Belief shifted from self-doubt to curiosity. Within weeks, his students began to mirror his calm. The neuroscientific term for this is resonance, the synchronization of neural rhythms between people. Belief is contagious. It passes through tone, gaze, posture. The invisible field between minds. Modern research on mirror neurons has proven what James could only intuit, that we influence and are influenced by the inner stance of others. This is why one person's calm can settle an entire room, why one leader's belief in a project can awaken effort in a team. The brain imitates belief. It seeks coherence in the social field, so every private conviction radiates outward, becoming part of a collective atmosphere. Belief, therefore, is not selfish. It is social. It teaches others what reality to share. To train this consciously, you might begin each morning by asking a simple question. What do I want my belief to broadcast today? Not as affirmation, but as alignment. Feel it in the body before words arise. If your heart races, breathe slower until it matches the rhythm of trust. If your mind doubts, imagine what it would feel like if belief were true. This somatic rehearsal primes the nervous system for coherence. The body teaches the brain, and the brain teaches the world. This was the essence of James's pragmatic philosophy. Truth is not static. It becomes true through its consequences. Belief that leads to growth becomes truth. Belief that leads to paralysis becomes illusion. In a quiet way, the hidden power of belief turns ordinary life into sacred territory. Even the small actions, brushing your teeth, tying your shoes, walking to work, can become rituals of conviction when done with awareness. James saw the self as a stream, not a stone always flowing, always reforming, and belief was the current steering its course. Neuroscience now reveals that identity is indeed fluid. The brain rewires itself across decades, so there is no fixed you, only the pattern of what you repeatedly believe. The danger is forgetting this and thinking belief is permanent, because it can just as easily harden into a cage. Belief in fear, belief in scarcity, belief in failure. They all generate their own evidence. James called this the tragic loop, where the soul builds walls around its own prison. Yet even in that trap, the door remains open the moment. You believe it can be opened the moment you choose to imagine a new possibility. Your neurons begin dismantling the bars you built. Belief is not optimism. It is participation in creation. It says, I am willing to meet the unknown halfway. So if tonight you feel the old doubts rising, if your mind whispers that you are too late, remember that every great change began with a person who believed something different while everyone else laughed. The brain is listening to that whisper right now, and whatever you repeat will become the architecture of tomorrow. Belief is the seed, consciousness is the soil, and your actions are the sunlight they need. James would tell you that the universe bends toward those who dare to believe before proof appears. Neuroscience would translate that as the predictive brain aligning the world with expectation. Both describe the same miracle that the future begins inside the quiet chamber of belief. There is a moment in every transformation when the old belief still echoes and the new one has not yet found its full voice, when the mind feels like a battlefield, where two versions of you are fighting for control, one forged in fear and habit, the other born from quiet trust in possibility. This in-between space is where William James believed the true drama of human life unfolds. He called it the moral crisis of choice, the place where belief becomes destiny. Modern neuroscience sees the same moment as the rewiring phase, when old neural pathways are fading, but the new ones are not yet strong enough to hold their shape. It feels uncertain, shaky, sometimes lonely, because belief must walk ahead of evidence, and that is something few people are taught to do. A young engineer named Sarah once described how she almost gave up on her dream to design renewable energy systems. Her early prototypes failed. Investors withdrew. Her friends told her to be practical. But one evening she reread James's words that the art of being wise is knowing what to overlook, and she decided to overlook her failures for a while. Instead of seeing them as proof, she saw them as practice. She told herself that belief was not about predicting success. It was about refusing to surrender the meaning of her effort. Within months, she discovered a small but crucial design improvement, and what began as stubborn faith turned into a working model. Neuroscience calls this the reward prediction mechanism, the brain's ability to stay motivated by small signals of progress. Every time Sarah acted with belief, her brain recorded a pattern that said effort matters. The reason this matters so deeply is that belief is not a single thought. It is a relationship between the conscious mind and the unconscious, between what you choose to focus on and what the deeper layers of you begin to trust. William James compared consciousness to a stream always moving and belief to the current guiding its flow. But modern brain science shows how this works in physical terms. Your thoughts send electrical impulses across networks that become stronger with repetition. When you change your belief, you begin redirecting that flow. You build bridges to new emotional states, and with enough repetition, the old bridges collapse. The process can be uncomfortable because the brain dislikes uncertainty. It would rather live with familiar pain than unfamiliar peace. Jung would later expand on this by saying that belief is not just cognitive but symbolic. The images we hold about ourselves, whether of failure or strength, become living forces within the psyche. They guide our behavior from beneath awareness. This is why visualizing success works, not because it tricks the mind, but because it speaks in the language. The unconscious understands images, sensations, and emotions. When you picture yourself succeeding, the limbic system activates as though it were already happening when you imagine kindness. The vagus nerve softens the body when you hold gratitude. Even for small things, dopamine begins to flow. Belief is not fantasy. It is rehearsal. If you wish to experience this even briefly, take a quiet moment tonight and close your eyes. Recall a moment in your life when you felt proud, even if it was small. Let that image expand until you can feel the posture, the breath, the warmth in your chest. That memory is a neural blueprint of belief. When you relive it, your brain reactivates the same circuits, and each repetition makes it easier to return to that state tomorrow. This is how belief becomes embodied. It stops being an idea and starts becoming a way of moving through the world. William James once said that our faith in the value of an ideal helps to create the fact that confirms it. Modern studies of the placebo effect continue to show how deeply true this is. People who believe a pill will heal them, activate their immune systems, even if the pill is inert. Their expectation instructs their biology, and this is not weakness, it is power. Belief speaks the language of cells. It tells the body what story to perform, and that story can be illness or healing depending on what we whisper. Inside ourselves, belief therefore is medicine or poison, and each day we choose the dose. There was another man named Arif, a call center worker who spent his nights staring at the ceiling. Feeling trapped by routine one day during lunch, he read a quote by James that said, "To change one's life, start immediately, do it flamboyantly, no exceptions." He laughed at the word flamboyantly, but that night he decided to act on it. He signed up for an evening art class, something he had always wanted, but thought was foolish. Within weeks, he found himself more alive, not because the job changed, but because his belief about himself had shifted from worker to creator. Neuroscience would call this a shift in default mode, network activity. His brain began to map identity differently when he painted. He felt time dissolve, stress faded, meaning returned. Belief had rewritten his sense of self without permission from the outer world. This is the quiet revolution. James foresaw the recognition that belief is the hinge upon which every transformation turns. Not the last step, but the first. Belief tells the brain what world to look for, and the world answers with evidence. The same neurons that once fired for despair can learn to fire for courage. The same circuits that memorized shame can memorize self-respect, but only if the person inside dares to change the signal. When you think of your own life, consider how many of your limits began as someone else's belief. A parent, a teacher, a culture, repeating that you were too sensitive, too slow, too strange. Each repetition planted a pattern, and that pattern became a fact in your mind. But you are not the sum of those borrowed beliefs. You are the awareness that can observe them and choose. Again, James said that belief begins with a deliberate act of will, to assume something is true for the sake of the possibility it opens, and modern science agrees the mind's predictions shape perception before data even arrives. To believe differently is to begin perceiving differently. So as this part closes, imagine your own life as a field of possibility, every belief a seed. Some seeds were planted without your consent, but you can still decide which ones to water. If you water fear, it grows. If you water trust, it grows too. The soil does not judge it, only obeys what you feed it. The hidden power of belief is that it listens and creates accordingly. The more you tend to faith in your own capacity, the more your brain begins to bloom around that truth, and slowly reality bends toward what you dared to imagine. William James would call that the miracle of attention. Modern neuroscience calls it the self-fulfilling feedback loop, but in human language, it is simply this: what you believe, you become. There comes a time when belief is no longer something you practice, it becomes the air you breathe, the lens through which you see everything around you. William James spent his life trying to show people that belief is not a luxury of dreamers. It is the foundation of action, the pulse that makes life move forward. Modern neuroscience echoes his words with data, showing how our thoughts mold the very circuits that define our perception. Reality bends toward the story we tell about it. When you choose to believe that your choices matter, your brain begins aligning attention toward opportunity. When you believe effort is wasted, your brain filters out all proof to the contrary. The hidden power of belief lies in its quiet consistency. It does not demand grand gestures. It grows through repetition every morning. Thought, every decision, every self-spoken word teaches your nervous system what world to prepare for. When you sit with fear, but choose to act anyway, your neurons record. Courage, when you meet failure but refuse to collapse, your brain learns resilience. Belief is a biological rehearsal for the kind of life you wish to live. Imagine waking before dawn, the world still half asleep. You stand by the window feeling the soft hum of your pulse, and for a brief moment you understand that everything you will do today will echo through the small machinery of the mind. Every gesture of faith will leave a trace. Every doubt will also leave one belief. Therefore is not just what you think it is, what you repeat enough times to become real in the body. and the body never forgets. So let this final reflection be simple. Believe in something that calls you higher. Believe that your effort carries weight. Believe that your quiet persistence will someday bloom in ways unseen, and when fear visits, as it always does, greet it with curiosity, because fear too is a form of belief misplaced but powerful, and when you shift it into trust, the energy transforms into motion. William James taught that the act of believing was itself an act of creation, and modern science now sees that the brain follows that same rhythm. Belief writes the script of the possible, and each day you hold the pen, and as the night comes and the noise of the day fades, remember this: there is no power more intimate than the one that shapes your reality from within. Belief does not guarantee perfection, it guarantees participation. It means showing up again and again, shaping the unseen into form through faith, action, and gentle repetition. Because the truth is, you are already living inside the world you have most deeply believed in, and at any moment you can begin to write a new one, the end.